Yo, what up, folks, and welcome back to Card Talks, the card review show that updates as frequently as you get news about Half-Life 3. I am your host, Memphis, and today we're going to be diving into some custom cards, straight from the mind of Mr. Claranus, aka the Snake Boy of the Pain 96 clan. Ah yes, the Venom Archetype. Everyone's favorite GX archetype that Konami loves to hate, piloted by everyone's favorite GX villain, Tristan Taylor's uncle. These much maligned reptiles haven't gotten any support directly ever since their release back in, 2007-ish? And so today, we're going to be taking a look at what support for the Venoms might look like if Konami were to allow just about anybody to make cards for them, which, to be fair, might be a good idea. Let's dive right into the monster lineup with Venom Priestess, a level 4 dark spellcaster monster with 800 attack and 1400 defense, which, when normal summoned, activates a Venom Swamp from your deck or your graveyard. You can discard a reptile monster to add a Venom spell directly from your deck to your hand, but if Venom Swamp stays on the field, you can activate a Venom spell card from your deck instead, and you can only use each of these effects once per turn. Temporarily putting aside the fact that this is in fact not a reptile-type monster, let's dive into the effect itself and find it's actually pretty good. It allows you to easily fetch your Venom Swamp straight from your deck or recover it from your graveyard so long as its normal summon doesn't get interrupted, and on top of that it allows you to set up the grave with whatever reptile monster you need to be in the graveyard in order to search out any of the other Venom spells, which, just so you know, there's some really nice ones coming in the future, which you're going to want to be searching off of this lady here. An absolutely fantastical searcher monster that you would definitely want to run at least 3 of in your main deck, despite the fact that this is in fact not a reptile. You see, in creating some new Venom monsters, our boy decided to inject some white-hot lore to the Venom archetype, essentially turning them into Amazoness in a swamp. And while I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea of changing Venoms from snakes worshipping snakes in a swamp to sexy ladies worshipping snakes in a swamp, one must be careful when designing cards around the lore in which they are entailed, as we don't want another case of Allies of Justice. We know what happened to those guys. Still, again, this is a fantastical searcher. I would definitely run at least 3 of them in my Venom deck, just to guarantee that I get all those nice juicy spells that I'd be wanting to play. Next we have Venom KUNOICHI. Nice. A level 4 Dark Warrior monster with 1800 attack and 1200 defense, which, when normal summoned, activates Venom Swamp from your deck or graveyard. As a quick effect, you can discard a reptile monster to add a trap card that has Venom counter in its text from your deck to your hand, but if Venom Swamp is face up on the field, you can set said card and then activate it in that same turn. And you can only use each of these effects once per turn. Again, while this monster isn't a reptile itself, you have to understand that we're starting to get a really big picture of what this new Venom support does, and that is, in essence, add variety to what Venoms do. Whereas before, Venoms were all about normal summoning one of the Venom snakes, placing an ineffective Venom counter on a monster, then waiting to get steamrolled, now we have monsters that search out their spell traps in order to set up a nice effective board, allowing the Venoms to survive a turn or two as the Venom Swamp tries to do its thing. Another really nice card, and there are some new Venom counter-generating cards in this lineup, and so this card, while it doesn't have as great a search variety as the Venom Priestess, I would run at least 2 of this in a normal Venom deck, 3 if you're playing a more trap-heavy variant, as you might want to consider doing as we get into more of these cards. Venom Dancer, again, nice, is a level 4 Dark Warrior with 1600 attack and 1400 defense, which, when normal summon, activates Venom Swamp from the deck or the graveyard. I'm starting to see a pattern here. You can remove 1 Venom counter from any monsters on the field, and if you do, switch those monsters to attack position. If Venom Swamp face up on the field, you can special summon a Venom monster from your hand or the grave, and you can only use each of these effects once per turn. The best thing about Venom Dancer is definitely the fact that it can special summon more Venom monsters from your hand or your graveyard, with the added benefit of not negating those monsters' effects. This allows you to recur things like Priestess as well as your KUNOICHI in order to get more searches off, or using any of the other Venom monsters in order to generate more Venom counters. The one iffy thing I have with this monster is that in order to use its effect to switch monsters into attack mode, you're going to be wanting to generate a lot of Venom counters very quickly, and the thing is, you kind of want to keep the Venom counters on the board for weakening them with Venom Swamp. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've always been an advocate for Venom counters doing things other than reducing attack points, but this doesn't seem like the best use of those counters. I mean, heck, I was almost expecting there to be a monster searcher with all these spell trap searchers. Then again, having the monster that special summons Venoms be the one that searches Venoms would probably be just a little unbalanced, despite the fact that you need to generate Venom counters in order for it to do so. But I digress. Run 3 of this in order to keep Venoms on the board. Venom Shaman, which for some reason I feel like I may have seen at some point in the past, but I'm not sure myself, is a level 4 Dark Spellcast with 1200 attack and 1600 defense. And if this card is normal summon, you can activate a Venom Swamp from your deck or grave. You can target a Venom monster in the grave, summon it with its effects negated. And if Venom Swamp is face up on the field, you can target a Venom monster in your grave. And until the end of the turn, this card's name and effects become that monster's name and effects until the end of the turn. But you can only use each of these effects once per turn. This monster is by far my favorite out of the 4 main deck Venoms that we've gotten in this lineup for a multitude of reasons. Being able to generate field presence by reviving all of your Venom monsters, admittedly with their effects negated, allows you to make sure that your Venom monster board never is without monsters to keep your life points safe. It allows you to summon back any Venom monster, which is pretty nice. You can bring back Venom Boa if you wanted to. But the biggest thing about the Venom Shaman is its ability to copy the name and effects of the Venom monsters in your grave, including every monster on this list. This way, you can use the effects of Priestess or Kunoichi in order to search out your spell traps, or the effect of Dancer to summon even more Venom monsters from your hand or grave without their effects negated. Certainly a very beefy sort of monster that allows you to just keep your monsters going, keep your effects rolling. You'd never want to run less than 3 of this thing in a Venom deck, because, as you'll find in a moment, changing the name of this card is actually pretty damn important. Now, with all the swarm potential that this set of cards is really showing off, you might be wondering what sort of extra deck shenanigans that Venoms are going to be getting into, whether they'll be Link-focused, Xyz-focused, Pendulum Summon. No. The Venoms, they are a GX archetype, and therefore we're going straight into the Fusion deck, with the first monster being Venom High Priestess, a level 7 Dark Reptile Fusion, requiring Venom Priestess and a Reptile monster, has 1200 attack and 2400 defense, which can place 2 Venom counters on a monster opponent controls. As long as this card's face up on the field, the first time each Venom spell would be destroyed. It is not. If it was Fusion summoned using Venom Cobra as its material, it gains the additional effect of allowing you to set a Snake Deity card from the deck to your field, which can be activated during that turn, at the cost of this monster not being able to attack. And if Venom Swamp is face up on the field, you can add a Venom spell from your grave to your hand. But you can only use each of these effects once per turn. Alright, I think somebody needs to call BEF Zelos. I think we finally found his long-lost snake sister. This card tries to fix a lot of the different issues that the Venom archetype has. Not only by placing more Venom counters on your opponents, which I think, as this is being worded, is going to be trying to do it non-targeted, and I hope it does, but it's also protecting your Venom spells from being destroyed by your opponent. It allows you to get your Snake Deity cards from your deck to your field. And things like Offerings to the Snake Deity, Snake Deity's Command, etc., etc., future support included. It's pretty beefy. On top of that, recurring Venom spells in order to be used yet again. An absolutely fantastic monster that you'll want to be trying to make as soon as possible in order to just keep your cards safe and secure, set up your traps, set up all your things. It's pretty good. The only downside I find with this monster is it's very specific. Requiring Venom Priestess and any reptile, that part I'm okay with. But the fact that you need to use both Venom Priestess and Venom Cobra in order to make sure you have all of the benefits of this card is a little tricky. Now, there are cards in this setup that are going to be allowing you to make this a little easier. Of course, our Shaman is very key to this. But there's also some of the spells that help you to do this as well. So, in a purely Venom sort of situation, I would say run at least 2 copies of the Venom High Priestess in order to guarantee that protection and that recovery and that trap setup and all the good stuff. Venom JOUNNIN, again, nice. Level 7 Dark Reptile Fusion, 2400 attack, 1800 defense, requiring Venom KUNOICHI and any reptile monster. which can place 2 Venom counters on a monster your opponent controls. Again, this is hopefully not a targeted thing. As a quick effect, you can banish a normal trap from your grave to activate that banished card's effect. If this card is fusion summon using Venom Serpent as a material, it gains the additional effect that whenever a trap resolves its effect, you can place a Venom counter on an opponent's monster. If a Venom Swamp is on the field, you can set a trap that has Venom counter in its text from the grave to the field, which can be activated during that turn. And you can only use the first, second, and fourth effects of this card once per turn. Now, if there's any sort of doubt as to what sort of Venom deck you should be running, JOUNNIN lets you know that you should probably be running the trap variant. Being able to recover any of the Venom traps that allow you to generate counters is absolutely phenomenal. Being able to spread counters yourself, pretty good. The effect I want to focus on the most, however, because it's the beefy one, is that second effect, banishing a normal trap to activate that card's effect. Mind you, that's not just Venom cards. No, it's any normal trap card. It can be banished by this monster to copy its effects. Such effects can include the following. Mirror Force in order to destroy and or bounce your opponent's cards. Torrential Tribute to field nuke your opponent's monsters when you summon the monsters. Infinite Impermanence to quick effect negate your opponent's stuff. Wabaku to keep your Venom monsters alive and well. The House of Adhesive Tape. For this reason, I would say that Venom JOUNNIN is by far the beefiest of the fusions that we have seen thus far, and quite potentially of the lot of them. But there is one other thing we will talk about just a little bit later that truly cements it as the best fusion, and I would let you know it is in fact that second Venom counter generating effect. But more on that later. As this card stands right now, again, depending on the build that you're building, you run between 2 and 3 of this thing in order to generate all the trap card Venom love in the world. Next up we have Venom Enchantress, a level 7 Dark Reptile fusion with 2200 attack and 2000 defense, has the same first effect as all the other fusion monsters have, and as its effect, at the start of the damage step, if one of your Venom, Venomenon, or Venomenaga monsters attacks an opponent's monster with a Venom counter, you can switch that monster to attack position. If this card is fusion someone using Venom Snake as its material, it gains the additional effect that if any Venom, Venomenon, or Venomenaga attacks an opponent's monster with a Venom counter, that monster as attack and defense is halved and can't use its effects until the end of the damage step. If Venom Swamp's on the field, when you destroy a monster by battle, you can summon a Venom monster whose level is less or equal to that destroyed monster. From where, I'm not sure, but it's from somewhere. But you can only use these effects once per turn. So Venom Enchantress is an interesting monster, essentially turning your Venom and Venomenon and Venomenagas and what's-it and have-zoos into a low-budget sort of Armades effect, allowing you to beat over your opponent's monsters without them being able to use their effects, as well as weakening their attack very much so. The difficulty I have with this particular effect is that it only works once per turn when one monster attacks. This limits the effectiveness of this Venom Enchantress. It does work on herself, thankfully, but it means that only one monster gets to do the maxi damage, and with some of these monsters not being reptiles, this means that Big Snake Mama Venomenaga might not be able to do as much damage as she potentially can do, and it's just going to start feeling small and sad next to certain other individuals. I would have honestly liked this card a little bit better if this had been, say, the Link monster of the bunch. Maybe a Link 2 monster that had arrows pointing down and the monsters it pointed to gained these effects. But as it stands, it's an interesting monster. It at least allows your Venoms to do just a little bit extra damage. And it does allow you to generate more Venom monsters, so I would say run 1 for style points. And now for the last of the Venom fusion monsters and the last Venom monster of this lineup, we have Venom Spiritualist, level 7 Dark Fusion Reptile with 1400 attack and 2200 defense. The first effect the same as the rest, and you can send a reptile monster from your deck to the grave to summon a Venom from your grave whose level is equal or lower than the level and has a different name for the monster sent to the grave. And if summoned using Venom Boa's material, it gains the additional effect that you can send this card and a Venom monster from your field to the grave to summon a level 7 or higher reptile-type monster from your hand or grave, ignoring its summoning conditions, except for Venomenaga. You can only use each of these effects once per turn, and if Venom Swamp is face up on the field, your opponent cannot banish cards from your graveyard. So, Venom Spiritualist. Where do I start with this one? It's not a bad card by any means. It helps you set up more monsters in your graveyard, brings them back. It's not quite Lumina the Light Sworn Sorceress, but it's a start for Venoms if anything else. My main issue is that you can't summon Phenomanaga with this. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love offering the Snake Deity combo too, but come on, this is the modern day. You gotta be a little less safe with this. I'm just gonna have to say, vetoing this. This summons Phenomanaga now, because if you're going to be donating 2 materials to summoning this creature out that are specific materials, as well as sending it and another monster to the graveyard just to summon Phenomanaga, it's, we're summoning Phenomanaga with this thing. I don't care what's being said here. This is going to summon Phenomanaga. As with that last effect, the fact that this doesn't revive itself makes it a little iffy on the protection of the grave. I mean, you can revive it, of course, with Enchantress, or just anything, really, because it just doesn't have any summoning restrictions of its own. But it's, all in all, a nice card. Again, I would run 1 or 2, depending on what it, depending on if it's going to be getting that errata to summoning out Phenomanaga, because I really think it deserves to do that. Alrighty, now let's finally get ourselves into the spell lineup in order to show off the full power of the Venom Priestess. Starting off, of course, with our Venom Warning, a continuous spell that states that you can normal summon a Venom monster in addition to your normal summon, but if Venom swamps face on the field, you can special summon a Venom monster from grave or the hand. You can send this card and 1 or more Venom monsters you control the grave, special summon a Phenomenon from your hand deck or grave, and if a Venom Swamp would be destroyed, you can banish this card from the grave instead, but you only use each of the effects once per turn. Here we have a very nice card for just generating more field presence of all of your Venoms. It just allows you to normal summon a Venom, and then you get another Venom monster. And if you happen to have Venom Swamp already on the field, you can just special summon Venoms from the grave or the hand. It's pretty nice recovery as well. It doesn't negate any of your effects. Pretty nice card. Sadly, there's no Venoms that do anything when they're special summoned. That's the one thing. It's not a Trap Tricks deck. It's a Venom deck. But overall, a nice card that also helps with summoning out Phenomenon a little bit easier. And you can protect your Venom Swamp just a little harder, even though we already have the fusion that does that. But I digress. It's a nice card. Depending on the build, I'd say between 2 and 3. Leaning towards 3, but might be a little bricky at 3. Next up, we have the continuous spell, Venom Meeting. Doesn't look like Indiana Jones is having a good time in there, let me tell you. This spell allows you to, if you summon a Venom monster, allows you to special summon a reptile monster from your deck. You can fusion summon a Venom monster using face-up monsters you control on the field, and if Venom swamps on the field, you can place a Venom counter on all monsters your opponent controls, but you can only use each of these effects once per turn. This card allows you to generate even more insane field presence, just adding to the insane amount of swarm that these Venoms are getting. Just a lot of swarm. Now, it all makes sense now, with all the very specific fusion requirements, that a card like this would be very important. And it does allow you to just fusion summon your Venoms. It's a continuous spell for Venoms, and let me tell you. That way you don't need to worry about no polymerizations. Don't need to worry about polys or recovering polys, because so long as you keep Venom Meeting on the board, you can fusion summon as much as you want. And on top of it all, it allows you to generate some of those nice Venom counters to weaken your opponent's monsters and do away with them at your leisure. It would have been kind of nice if this card allowed me to use monsters with counters to do fusions, although, no, I would actually kind of like it if it allowed me to use at least one of my opponent's monsters as material if it had Venom counters, to give it a kind of quasi, semi, super poly sort of feel. Something like that. But, all in all, another fantastic card. I would say run 3 of this one, because this is like even better than Venom Warning to a degree. It just let me summon any Venom or reptile that I want whenever I summon a Venom. It's pretty damn good. Sadly, that being the end of the spells, let's get into the trap with Venom Gas, a continuous trap card that states that whenever a Venom card resolves its effect, you can put a Venom counter on one of the monsters your opponent controls. If your opponent declares an attack, you banish this card from the grave to negate the battle, and if Venom Swamp stays on the field, you can put a Venom counter on all the monsters your opponent controls, but you can only use this effect of Venom Gas once per turn. The plebeian mind immediately thinks of sending this card immediately to the grave with goods in order to negate your opponent's battle phase, which I presume is what this card does, and you would be right to think that's a good thing to do. However, this is a continuous trap, so you could make the argument of using things like Magic Planter to get this into the grave, as well as drawing 2 cards off of it. The big thing I want to highlight is that first effect, however, that whenever a Venom card resolves its effect, you put a Venom counter on a monster opponent controls, this not being a once per turn whatsoever. Going back to Venom JOUNNIN, remember that effect of hers? Whenever a trap resolves its effect, place a Venom counter on an opponent's monster. This is a Venom monster, and that effect is not a once per turn. That's right, I think, unless I'm reading between the lines a little too hard, or missing a ruling somewhere, that sounds like a suspiciously infinite loop. That's right, once you've activated JOUNNIN's effect in order to place Venom counters, then your Venom gas triggers allow you to place a Venom counter. That means that a trap resolved its effect, and that means you can put another Venom counter, which then triggers gas to place more Venom counters, and the Venom Swamp happens to be on the field, which if you're playing all the supports you more than likely do, you get yourself one of the slowest field nukes I've ever heard of, eventually wearing down all of your opponent's monsters on your turn in order to just effectively destroy everything they have. In fact, you can do this to your opponent on their turn as well, as long as you play just any old trap card. So yes, that might need to be retconned a little bit. I don't think Konami would allow even the Venoms to have a very slow-minded sort of infinite loop. And considering some of the other cards that are in this lineup, that would probably need to be retconned just a little bit. Still, though, this is a fantastic card just for its graveyard effect and the fact it's, again, continuous trap card, send to the grave Magic Planner, things of that nature. It's got versatility to it. Run 2 to 3 depending on your build. Venom Tongue is a normal trap that states your opponent can add a card from their deck or grave to their hand. If they do, your Venom cards cannot be affected by your opponent's card effects to their next draw phase. If they do not add a card by this effect, you can put a Venom counter on all the monsters they control, but you can only use this effect once per turn. Setting aside the fact that somebody allowed this small child to wander off on their own, this card, to most minds, may seem like a bit of a stinker. I mean, what card in their right mind lets you give your opponent literally anything they want from their deck or their grave back to their immediate use? But then you start to think, if you have an established board already on the board, then perhaps protecting that from your opponent for a full turn and a half, if you activate this on your opponent's turn, will allow you to keep your cards well and truly protected from everything but battle, which is something that things like Venom Gas protects you from, as well as just having those Venom counters spread about the board. The one negative thing about Venom Tongue I will mention is if your opponent doesn't have any monsters, then, well, you're not going to be able to have a chance to play this card. Considering that if they have no monsters, they're just going to pick that second effect and suffer no ill effects. It's a neat, interesting card. I don't see this being a main deck sort of thing, unless you want to put in one as a funky tech. And last, but certainly not least, we have the final Venom card of this lineup, being Absolute Power Venom, which is a continuous trap card that states that you can only control one Absolute Power Venom on the field, and you apply these effects to monsters that have Venom counters. 2 or 3 more. The monster cannot take an attack. 4 or 5 more. The opponent's monster can activate its effects. 6 or 7 more. That monster's effects are negated. You can remove from either side of the field, and in any way, 8 Venom counters to place a Hyper Venom counter on Venomanaga you control. And you can only use this effect once per turn. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify this thing and say it's 2, 4, and 6 plus counters in order to make it a little easier to understand how this thing works. So basically how this card just functions is that any monsters with Venom counters, the more the counters they have, the more debilitated that monster will be. Losing its ability to attack, losing its ability to use its effects, and having its effects negated in general for those pesky cards with automatic effects. Now the one glaring issue I do see with this card is the fact that monsters with a lot of Venom counters tend to be kinda dead. You see, monsters with Venom counters, while Venom Swamp is on the field, lose 500 attack and defense for every Venom counter on them. And once they lose all their attack from Venom Swamp, they kind of explode. So a monster with 4 counters is not going to survive that long. In fact, most monsters would not survive that long with that many counters. But I digress. One might instead say that this is your backup plan for the Venoms. In case your Venom Swamp happens to be gone for whatever reason, you have this card as your backup option. Your opponent's monsters have lots of Venom counters from your generation via the fusions, the poisonous gas, etc., etc., and those monsters will quickly and easily have all their attacks eliminated, all their effects negated. Their effects cannot be activated. Of course, when we take into account the potential infinite loop of Venom gas, this card will again need either being retconned or, more likely, the Venom gas would have to be. Still, though, it's an amazing card just as a nice backup option for the Venoms. I wouldn't run more than one of it because it's a very special card that you just need to take very good care of. And so you have a nice card that just allows you to make full use of the Venom counters if they, for whatever reason, cannot be reducing your opponent's attack to a whole whopping 0. Well, thank you everybody at home very much for watching today's video. It's been a very big treat to be looking through all these Venoms with you through the mind of Mr. Claranus. You know, when he sent me this Google Doc with all of these cards that he had so lovingly created over the past few months, all the lore and craziness that he involved with his Venoms, I was truly blown away. The sheer amount of detail and care that went into crafting each and every one of these Venoms is truly inspiring, it has to be said. You can tell that this is a gentleman who really wanted Venoms to be playable, but not totally broken, at least intentionally. Overall, I would say that this lineup of Venom support, it's pretty good. We got some nice starters that laid into some nice big combos. The more spells you have, the more cards you have in play. There's a very big potential for just swarming out tons and tons of snakes in order to promote a lot of field presence, do the fusion summons, make other cards as well. You can link summon, you can exceed, you can do all sorts of things. You're not locked out of things, but you're still strongly encouraged to do the Venom thing. Now, I would have kind of liked a couple other things with this lot. There isn't as many cards here that make use of the Venom counters for things other than reducing attack, which would have been a nice plan B option for the deck on top of the absolute power force. And one thing I really would have liked is like a retrain of the OG Venom Swamp, something that always counts as Venom Swamp and maybe allows you to generate those Venom counters during your turn and not just during the end phase. But other than that, I really like this bunch of cards, so they got my seal of approval. I do enjoy me some Venoms, and I would definitely play all these cards if Konami would just have the balls to make something half as good. I'm going to go ahead and put a link down in the comment section, which I hope everyone will visit after watching this. And if you want to check out the Reddit for custom cards that this is all going to be linked to, then go ahead and give it a shot. Leave Claranus a little comment. Tell him he did a good job. That would be nice of you to do. So everybody at home, thank you very much for watching this episode of Card Talks. Next time on Card Talks, whenever that happens to be, we'll have to take a look at some new custom cards, because that seems to be way more enjoyable than looking at new cards, let me tell you. So thanks for watching. Your boy Memphis signing out. I'll see you next time. Stay frosty.